There is a city that most people think they know. They have heard of it, they have seen the postcards, maybe they have even visited, but the Dublin that exists today, the pubs, the tourists, the modern streets, that is not the Dublin I want to talk to you about. I want to take you back to a time when this city was one of the most powerful places in the British Empire. And then, over the next 100 years, in the 1800s, is one of the most dramatic, painful, and extraordinary stories in all of European history. A city that had everything, and was slowly stripped of almost all of it. This is that story. In this video, you are going to see Dublin at its most grand and its most broken. You will learn about the day Ireland lost its own parliament. You will meet a 25-year-old rebel who walked to his death on a Tuesday morning on Thomas Street. You will see what a famine does to a city. You will watch ordinary people, with nothing left to lose, begin to change the course of history. And all the visuals you are seeing right now, this Dublin, this world, has been rebuilt using advanced AI technology. Because this city no longer exists, we are bringing it back for you. It is the year 1800, and Dublin is honestly a sight. Walk down any of the main streets near the city centre, Merrion Square, Fitzwilliam Square, Sackville Street, and what you see is a city that is trying very hard to look important. And the thing is, it is. At this moment in time, Dublin is the second largest city in the entire British Empire. Only London is bigger. The streets are wide and planned. The buildings are tall, red brick, perfectly symmetrical. Big windows, high ceilings, ornate doorways painted in greens and blacks and blues. This is Georgian architecture, named after the British kings called George, who ruled at this time. And Dublin has some of the finest examples of it anywhere in the world. Down by the river, the Custom House stands like it owns the entire city, and in a way it does. Completed just 9 years earlier in 1791, this building was designed by an architect named James Gandon, and it is genuinely one of the most beautiful public buildings in Europe at this time. A huge copper dome sits on top, stone columns stand at the front, and all across the walls there are carved stone faces and figures that represent the rivers of Ireland. It is a building that says, loudly, "We are here and we matter." A short walk away, the Four Courts building, also designed by Gandon, is where all of Ireland's most important legal cases are heard. And just down the road, at College Green, you have two buildings sitting almost face to face that tell you everything about this city's complicated identity. On one side, Trinity College, founded in 1592, already one of the most respected universities in Europe, home to thousands of books and scholars, and one of the oldest surviving books in the world, the Book of Kells. On the other side, the Irish Parliament building, where, right now in 1800, Irish politicians are still making decisions for Ireland. Here is the thing about that parliament. It is not going to last the year. In 1800, the British government passes a law called the Act of Union, and what this law does is brutal in its simplicity. It shuts down the Irish Parliament completely. From now on, Ireland is fully absorbed into the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. Irish politicians pack up their things and travel to London if they want any say in how their country is run. The Parliament building on College Green, this grand, important symbol of Irish self-governance, is sold off. It eventually becomes a bank, the Bank of Ireland. Where there were once politicians arguing over Irish laws, there are now bank clerks counting money. And that, honestly, tells you everything you need to know about what the Act of Union meant for Dublin. But for most people living in Dublin in 1800, the Act of Union is just another thing that rich people decided. Because the daily reality of life for an ordinary Dubliner has nothing to do with parliaments or grand buildings. It is hard work from before sunrise to after sunset, with very little to show for it. The working people of Dublin, and they make up the vast majority of the city, are up before dawn. The men work at the docks along the Liffey, loading and unloading goods from trading ships. Others drive carts, dig roads, work in the Guinness brewery on James's Street, which is already a well-established business by 1800, or take on whatever labouring work they can find. Women work as domestic servants in the big houses, or as market sellers, or as washerwomen, scrubbing clothes for wealthy families. Children work too. There is no free schooling for most kids at this time. If your family needs money, you contribute. That is just how it is. 3 years into the new century, a young man decides to do something about British rule in Ireland. His name is Robert Emmet. He is 25 years old. He is educated, articulate, and completely consumed by the idea that Ireland should govern itself. He has connections to the United Irishmen, the group that had attempted a much larger rebellion in 1798, and he spends months secretly gathering weapons and planning a rebellion in Dublin. His target is Dublin Castle, the seat of British power in Ireland. If he can take the castle, he believes, the rest of Ireland will rise up. On the night of July 23rd, 1803, the plan falls apart almost immediately. The weapons depot explodes early by accident. The numbers of men who show up are far fewer than expected. The coordinated risings around the country do not happen, and in the chaos of that night, on Thomas Street, a carriage carrying 2 men, Lord Kilwarden and his nephew, is stopped by the crowd and both men are killed. Emmet did not order this. He is horrified, but it seals his fate. He is caught, tried for treason, and brought back to Thomas Street, the same street where the violence of that night happened, to be executed. On September 20th, 1803, Robert Emmet is hanged and then beheaded in public. Through the first half of the century, Dublin keeps growing and changing. In 1814, the General Post Office, known as the GPO, opens on Sackville Street, which is now called O'Connell Street. It is a massive building with tall stone columns at the front and a long, wide facade. It becomes one of the most important buildings in Dublin, though it will become even more important much later. In 1809, Nelson's Pillar is built right in the middle of Sackville Street, a tall column topped with a statue of the British Admiral Horatio Nelson. Not everyone in Dublin is happy about a British war hero standing in the middle of their main street, but there it stands for over a century. Railways begin to arrive in Dublin in the 1830s. The first railway line in Ireland opens in 1834, running from Dublin to Dunlawgare on the coast. By the 1840s, more lines are being built. The city is slowly being connected to the rest of Ireland. And then comes the darkest chapter. The year is 1845, and a disease attacks the potato crop across Ireland. This is catastrophic because for millions of poor Irish people, the potato is their main source of food. When the crop fails, there is simply nothing to eat. Over the next 7 years, approximately 1 million people in Ireland die of starvation and disease. Another million or more emigrate, leaving Ireland forever on coffin ships to America, Canada, and Australia. Dublin, as the main city, becomes a place where starving people from the countryside arrive looking for food, work, or a way out of the country. The streets of Dublin fill with desperate people. Workhouses, large grim buildings where the destitute could get basic food and shelter in exchange for hard labor, are completely overwhelmed. The North and South Union workhouses in Dublin hold thousands of people in terrible conditions. Fever and disease spread rapidly. The British government's response is slow, and in the eyes of most Irish people, deeply inadequate. Food exports actually continue to leave Ireland during the famine, which causes enormous bitterness and anger that lasts for generations. The famine does not just reduce the population, it breaks something deep in the relationship between Ireland and Britain. By the 1860s, a new generation of Irish rebels has formed. They call themselves the Irish Republican Brotherhood, but most people know them as the Fenians. Their goal is simple: an independent Irish republic, achieved by force if necessary. In March 1867, the Fenians attempt a rising in Ireland, including action around Dublin. The rebellion is quickly put down by British forces, but it signals something important. The desire for Irish independence has not gone away. If anything, the famine has made it stronger and more determined. The Fenians also carry out dramatic actions in England, including an explosion at Clerkenwell Prison in London in December 1867 that kills several people. The world is watching Ireland now, and Dublin is the centre of this political storm. In the year 1882, something happens in Dublin that shocks the entire world. On the 6th of May, in Phoenix Park, one of the largest enclosed public parks in any European capital city, two top British officials in Ireland are assassinated. Lord Frederick Cavendish, who has just arrived in Dublin as the new Chief Secretary for Ireland, and his Under-Secretary Thomas Henry Burke are stabbed to death by a group called the Irish National Invincibles while they are walking through the park on a sunny evening. The murders are brutal and sudden. They cause outrage across Britain and even among many Irish nationalists who find the method too extreme. Charles Stewart Parnell, who is at this time the most powerful Irish political leader in the British Parliament, publicly condemns the killings. But the Phoenix Park murders harden attitudes on both sides and make finding a peaceful solution to the Irish question even more difficult. By the time the 1890s arrive, Dublin is a very different city from the grand, powerful place it was in 1800. The population has changed dramatically. The Great Famine sent waves of people out of Ireland, and Dublin's population is smaller than it was 50 years earlier. The once beautiful Georgian houses in many parts of the city have become badly overcrowded tenements. The contrast between the wealthy parts of Dublin, around Ballsbridge, Rathmines, and the leafy southern suburbs, and the desperate poverty of the inner city slums is enormous. And yet, the city is also developing. Horse-drawn trams now run through the main streets. Gas lamps light the roads at night. New businesses, shops, and banks have opened. The railways connect Dublin to every corner of Ireland. Libraries and museums have been built. The National Museum of Ireland and the National Library both open in 1890, giving ordinary people access to knowledge and culture for the first time on a large scale. Dublin in 1899 is a city full of tension and energy. The poverty is real and crushing. The political anger is deep and growing. And just over the horizon, a new century is coming, one that will bring revolution, war, and the birth of a new Irish state. So there you have it, 100 years in the life of one city. Dublin went from being a powerful and beautiful Georgian capital to a city shaken by political upheaval, devastated by famine, and burning with the desire for independence. The people of Dublin never stopped fighting for something better. If you found this video interesting, please do subscribe to our channel. There is a lot more history coming your way, and you do not want to miss it.